Welcome to the Newsome MMA podcast in association with MMA Play 365, giving you the edge in MMA betting. I'm your host as always, Newsome, with your co-host John, and tonight we're back once again to break down UFC 242 from Abu Dhabi, United Arab Emirates. John, how are you doing tonight, man?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm very well. It's another pay-per-view, another pay-per-view's rolled around. It's a great card, some really fun fights on here. I know that you're going to be looking forward to this, the amount of Russians, Dagestanis, Eastern Europeans on the card. I know you love them guys, so I'm looking forward to breaking down some fights, man.
Yeah, for sure, man. If you've got an Ov or an Ev in your name and you're from anywhere that side of the world, I'm definitely going to love you for sure. Just before we continue, we need to talk about MMA Play 365. We're coming off another winning month in August. Whether you were playing the long-term game by creating your own bets using the long-term gambler section, playing the parlays in our fun gambler section, or completely following our trap bets in the official bet section, once again, everyone was a winner in August with MMA Play 365. We're now 2 months into the world's most unique betting advice platform for all things betting MMA, and both months have been winning months. And guess what? We still have our crazy offers available. Remember, it's only $198 for your first full year or $30 a month, which can be cancelled at any time. So sign up today and start making money. And with that said, let's break down some fights at UFC 242. And in the main event of the Newsome MMA main card is the main event of the evening. We've got the UFC World Lightweight Championship. We've got the lightweight champion Khabib Nurmagomedov versus the World Interim Lightweight Champion Dustin Poirier. John, awesome fight. Who have you got?
You said it, man. Awesome fight. This is a fight that I'm really looking forward to, and one that I'm really happy that Dustin Poirier has got, because he's got a great story in MMA. I mean, he's been around for years. Obviously, years ago he had he was filmed in the documentary when he was up and coming, and he first got signed to the UFC. Can't remember off the top of my head the name of it now. That was fantastic. It kind of gave everyone an insight into this kid coming up in the sport, and then he's gone from strength to strength, and kind of like guys like Michael Bisping and things like that. He's had his setbacks. I mean, obviously that fight against Conor McGregor, that was a big fight at the time. Obviously that was a weight class down, but there was a big build up to it and everything like that. And then obviously he lost that, got knocked out in the first round. Then he went on another nice run and got knocked out by Michael Johnson in the first round. And now he's gone on this run. He finally had his shot at the interim belt, which he took, and now he gets his chance to get the title off Khabib, to become the lightweight champion of the world. And it's a really fun fight. It's really, I don't want to say it's a really interesting fight. It is an interesting fight, but with Khabib, you know what kind of fight you're going to get. But there's always still that air of mystique around whether people can stop him and stop Khabib doing what he does. And the latest in line to do it is Dustin Poirier. Now, I've seen a lot of love for Poirier on social media and things like that, and I'm a big fan of the guy. I mean, this guy for me is probably in my top 5 fighters that. Not my best 5 fighters, but my top 5 fighters that I like to watch and love to see get in there. But man, he's going up against an absolute animal in Khabib. I mean, his last fight, obviously he hasn't fought since October of last year, the Conor McGregor fight. Obviously we know what happened in that fight. He absolutely dominated pretty much from start to finish. He looked as good as he's ever looked. A lot of people were saying that obviously that was the most dangerous fight, or bar the Tony Ferguson fight, that he could go up against, and with McGregor having that one punch knockout power. But again, man, Khabib just made it look relatively simple, and if anyone looked better on the feet out of the two, was Khabib as well. I mean, he temporarily knocked McGregor down with that big looping overhand right, and that's the thing that he can really work on, Khabib, and it gives him a real advantage that he's got such a good wrestling game, that we all know those training those wrestling takedowns and getting you onto the mat, that people are so scared, and it's so much in the back of their mind that he's at some point he's going to take you down. And if you look back on that Conor McGregor fight, the very first takedown he lands after about 45 seconds to a minute, I mean, he shoots from miles out, and he shoots right down onto that ankle, and McGregor does a good job for 20-25 seconds of fending off the takedown. he locks his hands in between the legs of Khabib, and he kind of sort of half has top control and of the back of Khabib for a minute, but Khabib just keeps on cranking it, man. He keeps on turning it. He keeps on working his way up the leg, the single leg, and eventually he gets you down, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. And I mean, when he's actually in that flow of his wrestling takedowns and chain wrestling like he does, I mean, I love watching it, man. I mean, some people moan about the wrestling, the grappling side of things, but I absolutely love watching him. And this fight again for me is another one of those fights where it's a puncher's chance, but for Dustin Poirier, I don't think he's going to be able to fend off the takedowns of Khabib. And when he gets taken down, there's questions over him getting back to his feet. Obviously, we saw him in the first fight against Eddie Alvarez get taken down. He's been taken down in a couple of other fights as well. And these guys that are taking him down, Alvarez, he's a good wrestler, but he's nowhere near on the level of Khabib. No one's on the level of Khabib. And I just can't see how Poirier is going to be able to stuff the takedowns for long enough to be able to inflict damage to Khabib, because Khabib has been caught a few times. He's been hit hard. McGregor landed a couple of decent, solid shots. Obviously, the Michael Johnson shot that we've all talked about, that everyone said that he was wobbled, but was he really? I'm still not convinced about that. I mean, he had a little tiny stumble, but I don't think he was in any kind of real trouble. Quinta hit him with some decent shots, but I mean, he just tends to walk through them. And for me, Dustin Poirier is the kind of guy that is an accumulation finisher. I mean, you look at the fight against Gaethje, you look at the fights against Pettis. I know that wasn't through strikes; it's that rib injury, but that was an accumulation of damage. The Alvarez fights, both 1 and 2, they were both like out and out wars where both, like, all the guys were just trading, and Khabib's not going to do that. I mean, he's not going to let Dustin stand there for long enough to punch him in the face 150 times in like 2 rounds or anything like that. I mean, he's going to move, he's going to be evasive, and then he's going to dive for an ankle whenever he sees the opportunity. And I think he's going to get it to the mat and hold it there for the majority of the round. So I really don't see how. I don't think Poirier's got that one punch knockout power, and the only way I really see him winning it is in a similar fashion to how Weili Zhang won the title at the weekend against Jessica Andrade, and that's just by kind of bull rushing Khabib, and if you can catch him off guard and catch Khabib maybe backing up a little bit, and he comes powering forward, just swinging bombs, and he lands a couple, and then he pushes him up, Khabib, up against the fence, and he can maybe land a couple of those knees that he lands really well in the clinch when he's got his opponent hurt. Maybe he can finish him there just with a wild flurry of strikes, but I don't think he's going to be able to land enough strikes to sort of finish it through the accumulation of punches that we've seen from him previously. So yeah, for me, this is Khabib's fight again. I think he's going to be able to take Dustin down. I think it's going to be similar to the Barboza fight, to the Michael Johnson fight, to the Conor McGregor fight. Dustin may stuff a couple, 2 or 3 takedowns, but at some point eventually you get taken down by him, and he holds you down. He uses that Dagestani handcuffs on you, and then he elevates the legs and ties them up so you can't release your legs, and you just can't get back to your feet. And I don't see Dustin Poirier, unfortunately, being any different. And yeah, for me, it's going to be Khabib Nurmagomedov to get the victory here. Maybe he finishes it later on in the fight, like we've seen before. He just smushes your face in when he gets you to the mat and hammers you with that ground and pound. But Poirier's a tough guy, man. I'm going to give Poirier the benefit of the doubt. I think he's going to go the 5 rounds, but just getting mauled by Khabib throughout. So I'm going with Khabib Nurmagomedov to win this fight via decision.
Yeah, man. I mean, first of all, the first thing I want to talk about and the first thing I want to mention is how happy I am for Dustin Poirier to be getting this shot, because, you know, he's on a killer win streak. He's done everything that you know a fighter should do to get the title shot. In the words of Poirier himself, you know, he's paid in full. And like, again, in the words of Poirier, he wouldn't ask for something that he didn't deserve, and he absolutely deserves this shot. I know he's the interim lightweight champion, but, you know, this is the, you know, this is the big one. This is for the undisputed lightweight championship, and this is the one that he's been asking for and wanting for a long time. And like I say, I'm so happy that he's got it. And also, just quickly outside the cage, such a good dude. The stuff that he does for charity and things like that. So if you can get involved, definitely get involved for sure. But coming back to the fight itself, I agree. I've seen a lot of love for Poirier at the betting window as well, and I'm hearing a lot of people really surprised about the betting line. And personally, I capped Khabib at -400, by the way. So the reason why I don't think anybody should be surprised that the line is this wide, does it reflect the fight itself? Potentially not. But the reason that the line is so wide is, can you imagine if Khabib was -200 or -250? Can you imagine the thousands and thousands of dollars that the bookies would get absolutely nailed with bets on Khabib? Like, it would be ridiculous. So the line's this wide for a reason, because if it was any shorter, which it did open a little bit shorter, it would just get steamed, which it has done. So I'm not surprised by the betting line from that perspective. But to the fight itself, it's such an intriguing fight because it is kind of grappler versus striker. And the reason I say kind of is because I think Khabib's striking is quite underrated as well. It's something that's developed. He was doing well against Iaquinta. He actually tested his own striking against Iaquinta. He decided to keep it standing and to see how the fight went on the feet. And he did really well against Iaquinta. He was winning the rounds. He was out striking a good striker in Iaquinta himself. And then he goes out against Conor McGregor and drops Conor McGregor. So, in regards to his striking, he can absolutely hang. His striking's okay. Do I think he's going to be in a massive amount of trouble if the worst case scenario for him happens and he can't get taken down? No, I don't think he's going to be in a huge amount of trouble. I think he can hang on the feet. Having said that, though, if the fight is a striking match for 25 minutes, then Poirier is going to win the fight. Dustin Poirier is a better striker than Khabib. It's just I just think Khabib can hang. That's all. I don't think it's a case that he's in a lot of trouble should he not be able to get takedowns. But Poirier's the better striker. I think he's got more power. I think he's technically better. I also don't think that's a secret. If the fight stays standing, it's going to be in Poirier's will for sure. So yeah, you've got to be able to stuff them takedowns. You've got to stop the takedowns coming from Khabib. And the last man to be able to do it was Gleison Tibau back in 2012, which was 7 years ago. There's been so many fights, so many years since that last man to stop the takedowns has made that possible. And every single fighter that comes in the cage with Khabib has exactly the same mindset, the same game plan. They've been drilling the takedowns in camp. They're saying they're going to knock him out. They're saying they're going to be able to keep it vertical. And it's just so much easier said than done, because it's just difficult. You know exactly what's coming, yet there's nothing that you can do about it. Well, nothing that most fighters can do about it. And it's just a case of Khabib just being the absolute master at what he does. He's relentless. His chain wrestling is ridiculous, going from a single to a double. He'll adopt trips and throws if he needs to, and he'll take you down. And if you stand back up, which look, Abel Trujillo was able to stand back up 21 times, But he'll keep his grip locked. He'll stay on you. He'll stick to you. He'll drag you down again. He'll suffocate you. And aside from all the little tricks that he's got, like you mentioned, John, the Dagestani handcuffs, where he keeps a hold of the wrist to trap an arm, and elevating the legs, crossing the legs over. What that does is that takes away your base. It stops a fighter being able to use the legs to stand back up to the feet. These are all little tricks that he uses. But the biggest thing for me, the best thing that Khabib does in his fights is it's his ability to suffocate his opponent on the mat and just completely zap their energy. And we saw that specifically in the Barboza fight. Barboza was, actively doing well, striking, but the second that he got took down, I think he was okay after that first one, but it was the second one. And after that, he just wasn't the same. He wasn't the same fighter. His cardio had been zapped. And from then, the fight just gets that little bit easier and that little bit easier. And this is something that Dustin Poirier is really going to have to think about inside the cage, because, I've I watched back both the Eddie Alvarez fights, and the first Eddie Alvarez fight, he took him down. And when he took him down, Dustin Poirier was really struggling to get back up to his feet. He was tiring himself out, really working to get back up to his feet. And Alvarez was actually holding him down. And to be fair, Alvarez was, he was his own enemy in that fight, because it was actually the illegal knees that caused Herb Dean to stop the fight and call it a no contest. If those illegal knees hadn't happened, who knows what would have happened? Would Dustin Poirier have got back up? If he had got back up, what would his cardio look like? And then in the second fight with Eddie Alvarez, I don't think he actually scored a takedown, but a couple of the close encounters towards the cage, Poirier jumped for guillotines, and Alvarez was able to escape them. But again, the point is, after he escaped them, Poirier was having a tough time getting back up to his feet. He did it once, but then when it went down again, Alvarez sort of had him in a weird mount position. Poirier was sort of sat down on his butt with his back against the cage, but Alvarez was working towards mount. And again, an illegal elbow caused Marc Goddard to stand them back up. And my point again, who knows what would have happened? Would Poirier have been able to stand back up from that position? But the reason why I think this is so relevant in this fight is because this is Eddie Alvarez. He's not a bad fighter. He's a world-class fighter, and he's a veteran. He's had a great career. But his wrestling, his grappling is not on the level of Khabib. It's not even close. So from my point of view, when I'm seeing that, and I'm seeing Alvarez be able to control Poirier on, against the cage or in the grappling and wrestling scenarios just a little bit, I just feel that Khabib's going to have even more success in doing that. However, it's an interesting one. The opening couple of rounds is going to be very interesting, because Poirier's path to victory here is by wiping Khabib out, by knocking him out. And I actually like your analogy of the your example, John, of the Weili Zhang and Andrade fight. I absolutely, if Poirier wins this fight, I absolutely seeing it being something like that. Poirier's come in, he's gone aggressive, he's landed a couple of shots, one of them's hurt Khabib, and then he's just poured it on him. And, with Khabib being hurt, struggling to complete a takedown, Poirier will see them coming a little bit easier, and then just really pouring it on him from there. That's how I see Poirier winning this fight. But ultimately, I just think that he's going to have some success in this fight. I don't think it's going to be a whitewash. He is tough. He will keep coming in there. But the couple of things that you've got to take into consideration is Poirier knows how good Khabib is. He's never fought a wrestler or a grappler like Khabib. So is he going to overexert himself? Is he going to be aggressive? Is he going to be a little bit apprehensive coming forward? Is he going to be a little cautious? Because you look at the Max Holloway fight, and Poirier was, he was aggressive. He was pushing forward. He was landing shots himself. He was eating shots to give shots. He was a dog in there. And I just feel you can't do that against the Khabib, because if you get too aggressive with him, it's just going to be a double leg or a push back to the cage, and then the chain wrestling starts, and then that's that's the start of the end of the fight. It's difficult to pick Poirier in this position, in this fight. I wish I could sit here and say that he's going to win and give him a much better chance than what it's making it sound like I'm giving him, but Khabib's just that good, man. He's just that good. Listen, I'll tip my cap if Poirier comes out here and beats Khabib. I'll be shocked, but I'll tip my cap, and I'll be happy for the dude because he deserves it. It's just Definitely. I think Khabib's on just a totally different level to everybody else in the lightweight division. And in fact, there is one fighter that is very close to him who's also on this card, which we'll talk about soon. But for this fight himself, I do think Khabib's going to smother Poirier against the cage. We saw Eddie Alvarez be able to sort of half take Poirier's back and, look for neck cranks and the chokes and stuff like that. And I actually think Khabib's going to finish Dustin Poirier. So I'm taking Khabib Nurmagomedov to win. And still, I'm going to take him to win via submission. And in the next fight on the Newsome MMA main card, we've got a rematch. And this is the one that people wanted. We were unsure which was the fifth fight to put on this full breakdown. The people wanted Edson Barboza versus Paul Felder. So, John, kick it off. Who have you got?
Yeah, this is going to be a really fun fight. I think if anybody out there wants to look for a technical striking battle, I mean, this is the fight that you go to. I mean, two of the most technical guys around. Obviously, Barboza, we've seen him around for years, and he's got some, especially with his kicks, he's got absolutely fantastic technique. I think Paul Felder, for me, although again he's extremely technically sound, he's more of he's got crisp striking with his hands, and then uses those knees and elbows so well. He throws spinning attacks, as does Barboza. I mean, Felder will more so go for the spinning back fist, spinning elbows. Barboza will go for those spinning kicks. Obviously, the Terrietim is the highlight reel that we get seen shown so often, but he also has that really good spinning kick to the body, and yeah, I think it's a good fight. I mean, it's definitely I think it's definitely a good fight to make at this time as well. Obviously, we know they've both fought before, but that was back in 2015. I think that was only Paul Felder's third fight in the UFC, possibly, if I remember correctly at the time, and both guys have made it up to the top of the division, or thereabouts. Probably Barboza more so than Paul Felder. I mean, Paul Felder's obviously got some good wins under his belt since that loss. But yeah, Barboza's gone all the way. He's fought the likes of Khabib, and for the back in UFC 219. And he's fought some of the top guys in the division, Anthony Pettis, Tony Ferguson, Justin Gaethje, all these kind of guys. So, yeah, I think it's a good time for these two guys to be fighting. I know that obviously Barboza's lost 3 of his last 4 against Gaethje, Kevin Lee, and Khabib, and Felder's on a bit more of a win streak. I mean, he's won 4 of his last 5. Obviously, the fight prior to his last fight, he lost to Mike Perry, but he broke his arm badly in that fight. And he still managed to go the distance and come out with a narrow split decision defeat. But when you just look at the guys that they're facing, I said that Barboza's lost 3 of his last 4. I mean, the guys that Barboza's fighting compared to the guys that Felder are fighting are completely different for me. I mean, Khabib, Kevin Lee, Dan Hooker, Justin Gaethje. I mean, they're top guys, and taking nothing away from Paul Felder, but he's fighting. He's wins come over James Vick, Oliveira again, Charles Oliveira is a very dangerous guy. Then Stevie Ray, Alex Ritchie, these kind of guys. I mean, his losses come to Mike Perry and Trinaldo, who are, again, taking nothing away from them. They're decent fighters, but they're not the level of fighters that Edson Barboza has been fighting now. Since they've last met, I think Edson has lost a bit of speed. I mean, only very slightly. I mean, his kicks still come out at ridiculous speed, but I think they're coming out slightly slower now as he ages and continues to obviously fight later into his career. I mean, he's only 33 years old, but he's got a lot of mileage on the clock. He's had a number of fights. I think he's approaching about fight number 30 in his professional career, but and that is starting to take a bit of toll. I mean, obviously he got absolutely mauled by Khabib in that fight. Then he lost to Kevin Lee. That was a bit of a war which went 5 rounds, and eventually the doctor stopped it. Justin Gaethje lost in his last fight in the first round. Gaethje's got heavy hands, and that's my one worry for Barboza in this fight. Has he taken a bit of damage? Is there a bit of mileage on the clock now? Can the Irish Dragon, who's himself fought 20 fights in his career, and he's a couple of years older, but I just feel like he's a bit of a fresher guy. I mean, he only fought once so far this year. He only fought once last year. Fought a few times in 2017. So I just feel like Edson Barboza, especially over the last few fights, has seen a bit more aged and weathered from some of those wars that he's been in. But yeah, for me, this is going to be quite similar to the first fight. I think it's going to be some high level striking. I think Barboza is going to utilise his kicks. I think Felder again will go for those, will try and utilise those low leg kicks that he did in the first fight. I think Felder, especially with that left hook in the first fight, had some success. I think he'll probably fancy his hands a bit more than Barboza does, as I mentioned earlier. But For me, I just think Barboza's still going to be able to outstrike him. I think he's going to be slightly quicker. I think he'll be able to hang outside the punching range if he's sensible and utilise his kicks. And he's, as I say, man, he still whips those kicks with such ferocity and such speed that 9 times out of 10 he's going to be able to outstrike most guys that he comes up against. And I think that's going to be the same in this. I do again think it's going to be a fight that goes to a decision, 3 rounds. I think that I can't see Felder finishing Barboza. I don't think Barboza is going to finish Paul Felder either. I think that maybe he's. I was going to say maybe he's lost that slight bit of aggression he's striking, but cause he had a few decision wins a few fights back, and obviously he's had a few losses. But then when you look at the Dan Hooker fight and the Beneil Dariush fight as well, man, they were 2 brutal victories via strikes. I mean, the Dan Hooker fight was just an elongated beating for 3 rounds. The Dariush fight was a perfectly timed knee. He sustained his opponent really well, sustained his movements, and timed that knee to perfection. So, I mean, Barboza can still put it on you as well, but Felder's a tough guy. We've seen that. We've seen that in the Mike Perry fight, and yeah, for me, I just think that Barboza is going to be a bit too quick still. I think he's going to be able to utilise his kicks to frustrate Felder on the outside, and if he does get into a kicking battle, you'd like to think that Barboza would win that. To win, I think Felder has to really get on the inside and be able to utilise that left hook that he had success with in the first fight, utilise his elbows. He knees very nicely out of the clinch, and he'll try to utilise that if he can get in close. But obviously, when you start marching forward, you leave yourself vulnerable to the heavy kicks of Barboza as well. So it's easier said than done. And ultimately, I just think Edson Barboza is going to be able to keep it at kicking range long enough throughout the 3 rounds to be able to outstrike Paul Felder. I think he's going to be that little bit too quick for him still, and I think he's going to be able to just rack up the numbers on his way to a decision victory. So I've got Edson Barboza to win this fight via decision. I think it's going to play out very similar to the first fight between the 2 of them.
Yeah, I think it's one of the most fun fights on the card, if I'm being honest. We're going to get another really clinical striking war, and the reason why I was a little unsure of putting this on the full breakdown of the podcast is just because I do think it's going to go in a very similar fashion to the first fight. Neither fight has changed that much. I feel that actually both have improved since the last fight. What you might find, though, is that they've both improved since the last fight and then sort of declined a little bit. And I don't mean that as any of them shot or any of them is declining, because I don't believe that to be the case at all. But I do think that in the last fight they were both just a little less experienced than what they are now, is what I'm trying to say. But man, you look at the fights that they've both had since they last fought each other, and we'll start with Felder. Since he last fought Barboza, he's fought Ross Pearson, Darren Cruikshank, Joshua Burtman, Francisco Trinaldo, Alessandro Ricci, Stevie Ray, Charles Oliveira, Mike Perry, James Vick. It's a decent list. But then you look at Barboza's fights since he's fought Paul Felder last: Tony Ferguson, Anthony Pettis, Gilbert Melendez, Beneil Dariush, Khabib Nurmagomedov, Kevin Lee, Dan Hooker, Justin Gaethje. Edson Barboza has had some unbelievable fights since he last fought, and you could argue that is Barboza looking a little bit, like you said, John, a little bit worn from all the battles he's been in. Is his chin potentially starting to decline a little bit? They're all arguments that some people will have against Barboza, but man, let's not take out the fact that he's fought some absolute killers since Paul Felder, and I think all the fights that is lost in the cage since Paul Felder would lose as well. I think Justin Gaethje beats Paul Felder. I think Kevin Lee would potentially beat Paul Felder. Habib would potentially beat Paul Felder. Tony Ferguson would beat Paul Felder. I just feel that Felder would lose the fights that Barboza's lost. And actually, Barboza's last fight against Justin Gaethje, I think Justin Gaethje is the exact type of fighter that will beat Barboza. That was a stylistic nightmare for Barboza. You know, a fighter that can take your leg kicks but hurt Barboza's legs back. You know, that was something that we're really intrigued to see, the leg battle war. Justin Gaethje won that leg battle war. That's how tough that dude is. But then not only that, he came forward and he was entering the pocket and he was landing punches in boxing range and hurting Barboza, drawing Barboza into a brawl, and then managing to catch him that way as well. Gaethje did everything right in that fight. And just a little side note for that fight as well. I can't imagine what was going through Barboza's head, because we heard that just before he left that locker room to walk out, and I'm talking about just before the guy hits the play button on on the walkout music for Edson Barboza, he got a call or a text from his wife saying that she'd gone into labor. So I cannot imagine what was going through that guy's head. You know, he's just about to open that locker room door and he gets told he's going to be a dad in several hours. So, man, I mean, I'm not making excuses for the guy. I think Justin Gaethje fought, like I said, the perfect fight. But, man, God knows what was going through Barboza's head at that point. And, you know, this leads me on to Paul Felder. You know, how does Paul Felder win this fight? Because if it goes, you know, if he plays it out as he played it last time against Barboza, he's going to lose again. So what does he have to do? And he has to do exactly what Gaethje did. He has to, you know, they're going to trade leg kicks early on. You know, I don't think that's a secret. But Felder has got, and I think he's got to do this early, man. I think he's got to get through those leg kicks, just like Gaethje did. I think he's got to get into the clinch and the boxing range. I think he's got to use hands. I think he's got to use elbows and weapons that he's got inside the clinch. And I think he's going to have to push forward on Barboza. And worst case scenario, again like Gaethje did, just draw Barboza into a brawl and try and crack him that way. The bottom line here, for Felder to win this fight, in my opinion, he's got to land hands on Barboza. And if he does that, I think he could potentially knock Barboza out, because Paul Felder's got power at short range as well. The problem that I feel Felder's going to have in this fight is, I think, a little bit of stubbornness and a little bit of pride is going to take over Felder, and he's going to show up in this fight, and you know, once he's been kicked a few times by Barboza, he's just going to think, fuck you, you're having it back. And I think at that point Felder is not playing to his advantages, and I think he's actually playing in the wheelhouse of Barboza. Now, I don't think Barboza's going to completely run over him in that respect, but with Felder being a little bit older, Barboza hasn't lost his power. I don't think he's lost too much speed, if any at all. I do think that Barboza could put a similar performance on Felder, a similar beating on Felder as what he did on Dan Hooker. And I know some people might be a little bit shocked at me saying that, but listen, let's not forget Dan Hooker's a fucking killer himself. I mean, Paul Felder had played a smart fight against James Vick, you know, hurt his calf, you know, he was touching him up, he beat him decisively. Dan Hooker went in there and fucking floored James Vick. So, you know, don't for 1 second tell me that, you know, that Edson Barboza, that destruction he put on Dan Hooker, which, again, I've said it before, the referee in the corner was disgusting in that fight. They shouldn't have let it go on even half as long as it did. But don't sit here and tell me that Edson Barboza cannot put that type of performance on a 34-year-old Paul Felder. You know, I don't think Paul Felder's declined, but the fact that he's a couple of years older, he's you know, more battle-tested than... battle worn than Dan Hooker. He could absolutely put that performance on Felder. But like I say, it all depends on this fight. Actually, depends on what how Felder enters the fight. If he comes into the fight wanting a kickboxing war, then I think Barboza's going to win. I think he'll win relatively comfortably. And if Felder comes in there with hands, wanting to close the distance, brawl inside boxing range, land short strikes on Barboza, then I think Paul Felder's going to knock him out. Like I say, I just think the majority of the fight is going to be at distance. I think we're going to see a phenomenal kickboxing war. I think we're going to see Barboza look a lot better in this fight than his previous fight. Felder's still tough. He was even tougher, though, you know, when they fought last time. I'm not sure he'll be able to withstand the power and the aggression that Barboza whips the kicks out at. this time around than he did in his slightly younger days. So for that reason, I'm going to take Edson Barboza to win via knockout, TKO. But do not be surprised if Felder comes in here smart and does what he needs to do stylistically to beat Barboza. But like I say, the pick's Edson Barboza to win. I'm going to take him to win via knockout. And in the next fight on the Newsome MMA main card, we've got Islam Makhachev versus Davi Ramos. John, who have you got?
Yeah, another really intriguing fight that I'm really looking forward to seeing. Islam Makhachev is another one of those nasty Russians, Dagestani-born Russians that are just a nightmare to go up against, and I'm really looking forward to seeing him back in action. Him and Khabib both on the same card. I mean, it's the kind of stuff that you see in nightmares and horror movies. If you're one of these guys that can't get up from takedowns, because Makhachev is very similar in his style to Khabib. I mean, we broke down the fight between him and Poirier earlier. I mean, this is just kind of a slightly lesser version on Makhachev's behalf anyway. To that breakdown with Khabib. I mean, his chain wrestling's fantastic. He's in your face. He's got that smothering top style as well. He's another guy who likes to elevate the legs, cross the legs, and trap them when he gets you to the mat. He's another guy that uses those Dagestani handcuffs to wrap you up and land the ground and pound or advanced position to look to take a neck or when you get to the ground. And he's just a very dangerous guy that I believe will hit the top 5 of the lightweight division at some point in the future. His ground game is that solid that he poses a problem for a lot of guys in the division. His striking isn't quite there yet. I mean, again, he's, as you said in the Khabib breakdown, he can hang with guys. I mean, if you look at his fights, I mean, he knocked out Gleison Tebow in 57 seconds of their fight last year at UFC 220. I mean, he's no slouch at all, but his world is when he gets it to the mat, and he's always looking to be able to get it there. And his last fight, actually, if you go back and watch that last fight, I think he won Fight of the Night as well against Arman Tsarukyan. That was a really great fight. I mean, there wasn't, I think I remember seeing the stats. I mean, there's only, I believe, about a combined 30 significant strikes throughout the fight on the feet. But he was just full of scrambles, both guys looking for the dominant position. I mean, we saw Makhachev get briefly taken down for the first time in his career, I believe, if I remember rightly, although only briefly, by Tsarukyan. I think he managed to land 4 or 5 takedowns of his own, though. A lot of time was spent in the clinch where he's very heavy. He'll look to tie up your arms in the clinch and then get those trips and get you to the mat that way if you're both getting close to one another. And man, he's just a really fun guy to watch, in my opinion. I really like his style. I really like that smothering, relentless wrestling style. And he's going up against a different sort of challenge today as well, because this weekend, sorry, as he's going up against a very, very good jiu-jitsu practitioner. I believe he's a 3rd degree black belt in Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Very, very dangerous guy when he hits the mat. I mean, he's when you look through his career, I mean, he specialises in that rear naked choke. If he takes you back, it's pretty much over. We saw that against John Gunther in his fight before last. He won that within 2 minutes. Nick Hine suffered the same fate in the first round. I mean, and he's got 2 or 3 other rear naked choke victories on his record. I mean, again, he's a guy who he's a decent striker. I mean, he just tends to throw with a lot of power when it's on the feet, but he's not an exceptional striker. I mean, obviously he wants the fight to be on the mat as well to utilise his grappling skills. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this plays out, because is Makhachev going to test the waters with Ramos and take him down and fancy his chances defending the submission attempts, defending the sweeps? Does he have confidence in his own heavy top pressure to be able to ride it out for the fight? And will he try to look for a submission finish on the ground himself? Obviously, if you open up for ground and pound when he gets on the mat, that you do leave yourself vulnerable to being reversed, to being swept, to getting your arm trapped and caught in an armbar or something like that. So it's going to be really interesting. Or is he not going to want to take this fight to the mat, and is he going to try and test it on the feet and see how they match in the striking battle? And I think that will, if the fight plays out that way, I think it'll be a very close fight. I think both of these guys are quite similar. Both are very capable hanging on the feet. Ramos, I think, throws with a bit more power, possibly. We tries to throw with a bit more power. He throws them bombs anyway. But yeah, it's going to be really interesting. But for me, I think Makhachev is going to fight his fight. I think he's going to try and take this fight to the mat. I think he's going to try and utilize that heavy top pressure and going to smother Ramos. I mean, when you look at the fight between Makhachev and Nick Lentz, so many times Makhachev basically put himself in Nick Lentz's guillotine and was just calm and just fended them off. And anyone who knows anything about Nick Lentz knows he's got one of the nastiest guillotines in the UFC. I mean, he's caught multiple guys in that guillotine choke before, but Makhachev didn't seem to care. I mean, he was happy to put his head in there and risk getting his neck taken, but he just worked his way out of it and did what he does best and got the fight to the mat and dominated from there on in. And I think he's going to be similar in this fight. I think he's going to be happy to take the fight to the mat. I think he has confidence in his ability. I think he's going to be able to utilise top pressure, and if he can get the fight to the mat in the first round, have heavy top control, doesn't allow Ramos to sweep or anything like that, isn't really put in any danger by any submissions. If he's chest to chest, that tight on the ground that Ramos can't find the space to lock up a submission, I think he'll just rinse and repeat that for 3 rounds and keep trying for the takedowns, keep chain wrestling and getting the fight to the mat. And for me, I think Makhachev is going to win this fight. I'm making a hat trick of decisions for the top 3 fights on the card. I think Islam Makhachev wins this fight via unanimous decision.
Yeah, man, like, this is such an exciting fight, and this is the exact stylistic fight that personally I love so much, because on one side you've got a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu wizard in Davi Ramos. You know, he must be in the top 5 in the UFC most credentialed BJJ black belts, because, you know, going to his BJJ tournaments, he's fought the who's who of guys, like, you name all the best guys in the world in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and the chances are Ramos has competed against them or at least rolled with them. So the dude, like I say, is as legit and as credentialed as you get in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And then on the opposite side of the ground game, you've got the Dagestani Islam Makhachev. You know, like I said earlier on, you know, there was a fighter later on the card when we were talking about Khabib, who was the closest fighter, I believe, to the level of Khabib, and Islam Makhachev was the guy that I was talking about when I said that. He's so good. Everything that we said about Khabib, Makhachev does. He utilises himself. I just don't think he's quite as good as Khabib right now. But like I say, the stylistic matchup is absolutely insane, because you've got a Russian monster, a Dagestani Russian monster, against a world-class, legitimate, credentialed Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu artist. And, you know, if and when it hits the mat, I'm really interested to see who comes out on top. However, I've got a funny feeling I'm going to be really disappointed in this fight at the same time, because like 8-9 times out of 10, when you get a stylistic matchup like this with a wrestler versus a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu artist, they tend to just respect each other so much it ends up being a kickboxing war. So be prepared for potentially a kickboxing fight in this fight, because both fighters either just struggle to, you know, will struggle to either get the entries and for the takedowns, or, like I say, just respect the skills and ability of their opponent and just stay away from that at all. I do think the fight hits the mat at some point, particularly later on in the fight. I think, which I'll mention talk about a little bit later on. But I do think the fight does hit the mat at some point. I don't think it's going to be a 15-minute stand-up war, but I definitely think that the start of the fight is going to be a striking battle. And actually, when you look at the striking, you've got Makhachev, who's a little bit, I know he knocked out Gleison Tibau in, 57 seconds. I think that was a bit of an anomaly performance. If I'm honest, if they fought again, I don't think he knocks him out in 57 seconds again. But you've got Makhachev, who I think's a little bit more of a timid technical striker, and I don't mean timid disrespectfully. What I mean by that is he's not running forward winging like huge hooks and overhand bombs trying to one bomb his opponent. He's a little bit more measured. He's a lot more measured than that. He's more technical. He'll stick a jab out. He'll move in and out of range. He'll look for his openings with his striking and get reads whilst he's doing it as well, especially reads for the takedown entries, which is important for his style. Whereas on the other side, you've got Ramos. Ramos will throw 1-2s, big shots, big hooks, overhands. The big action strikes. He's a little bit shorter, but he's thicker. He's more built. So it's going to be really interesting early on, because Makhachev has got to be careful. If Ramos gets aggressive, comes forward, and really starts launching shots at him, all it takes is one on the chin to put him out. And Adriano Martins managed to finish Makhachev by landing one on him as well. So Makhachev's got to be cautious of that early on, and especially because the way Ramos wants to get the fights to the mat, he will come forward aggressively to get his opponent on the back foot close to the cage, and then will pin against the cage and use his physical strength, his physical attributes, his strength and his power. So that's something Makhachev's got to be really careful from early on. But because of how Ramos is built, because of how he fights on the feet, and listen, when he gets fights to the mat, takedowns expend your cardio, your gas tank. He does slow down in fights. He doesn't always gas, but he does visibly slow down the longer the fight goes on. Now, I personally think that Ramos is going to have a very, very hard time taking Makhachev down if he tries. If he comes forward and, he tries to get a double or a single or get a hold of him to drag, throw, trip to the mat, I think Makhachev is just too good at defending any type of takedown attempt. Like I say, whether it be your conventional standard wrestling takedowns like your single or your double, or whether it be he's sort of halfway down if someone's tried to trip or throw him, but then he scrambles out of it. But that's Makhachev's world, man. That's his. The Sambo game is his world. If you're trying to trip and throw him, he's just going to be much better than you in that area. So that's why I think early on, especially, I think it's going to be a striking battle, because if Ramos does try and take Makhachev down, I think he's going to fail. And I don't think Makhachev's going to want to take Ramos down while he's fresh. So what I think is going to happen in this fight is I think it's going to be quite close on the feet. We're going to see winging bombs whistling past the jaw and the nose of Makhachev. And we're going to see David Ramos just getting touched up little by the strikes of Makhachev. I think we're going to see some clinch and grappling on the feet in regards to battles for the double underhooks and positional battles on the cage. And I think all these actions is gonna wear more on Ramos. And what I think the first round's gonna be really close. I think it's gonna be one of those where it could possibly be scored either way. But I think from the second round, Ramos will start slowing down and Makhachev will start coming more and more into the fight, visibly, noticeably. And then I think maybe halfway through the second round, towards the end of the second round, I think we might at that point see Makhachev engage in the wrestling. I think we might see him try and take Ramos down. I think a slightly tired Ramos on his back, I don't think Makhachev's going to be in much danger. I think if Ramos gets Makhachev down, let's talk hypothetically. If I'm wrong in what I'm saying, and Ramos does manage to get Makhachev down, or Ramos drops Makhachev and jumps on him in top control, then that's a completely different scenario. Because I think with Makhachev flat on his back on bottom, I think Ramos is going to be better topside. And the same for the other way around. I think if Ramos is on his back at any point in this fight, I don't think he's going to be whipping up arm bars and triangles, and I'd be very surprised if he managed to sweep or reverse Makhachev just because of his scrambling ability. And I think Makhachev will roll on him on the feet, but on the mat. But just to quickly mention in regards to level of competition as well, you've got Makhachev. He's fought in his last fight Arman Sarukian, who is an absolute prospect in this game. He's so good himself. He's fought Nick Lentz, who can be tricky. Chris Wade is a decent wrestler. Gleison Tibau, like I say, it was a bit of an anomaly performance. Gleison Tibau isn't the fighter he used to be, but Makhachev has fought some decent opponents. Adriano Martins in there, albeit that he lost. But then you look at Ramos' last few opponents. You've got Austin Hubbard, who made his UFC debut as a young kid on short notice. You've got John Gunther, who is not UFC caliber. Nick Hein, who's on his way out. Chris Gutzmacher, who is also questionable of is he UFC caliber or not. The fight before that was Sergio Moraes that he lost, but again, short notice in upper weight division, so you can't really put too much stock into that. I just don't think. I don't think Makhachev has fought world-class competition, but he's definitely fought the better competition than what Davi Ramos has. And like I say, I think there's levels in this game, man. I think Makhachev can beat Ramos on the feet if this does become a 15-minute stand-up war. But I do think the tools that Makhachev's got in this fight, and the fact that Ramos does slow down if he overexerts, and if he doesn't overexert, he's probably going to get pieced up on. So I like Makhachev to win in this fight, but I'm telling you, it gets very, very interesting if Ramos manages to take Makhachev down, become the second man to take him down after Arman Sarukian broke that. So if Ramos becomes the second man to take Makhachev down, it's going to be really, really interesting. And it's going to be really, really scary from Makhachev's point of view, because I do believe Ramos topside would absolutely roll on Makhachev. But we'll see what happens. Like I say, I think it's going to be a slow start to this fight. I think Ramos is going to get tired. I think Makhachev takes over. I don't think there's going to be too many big actions. I certainly don't think Makhachev submits Davi Ramos on the mat. And I'd be very surprised if he knocks him out as well, because Ramos is durable. So I am going to take Islam Makhachev to win this fight, and I'm going to take him to win by decision. And in the next fight on the Newsome MMA main card, we've got Mairbek Taisumov versus Carlos Diego Ferreira. John, who have you got?
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this fight, mainly because I'm a big fan of Mairbek Taisumov. I mean, I love the guy. He the one downside for Taisumov for me is that we just don't get to see him often enough. I mean, we only see him pretty much once a year. We saw him fight Des Green last year, Felipe Silva in 2017, Damir Hadzovic 2016, and then 2015 he had a couple of fights, Alan Patrick and I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce Tony Christodoulou. But yeah, so a guy that I'm really looking forward to seeing come back, and he's just an out and out beast. I mean, he's a guy that he said himself, don't forget my background is in wrestling, which it is, but he's so dangerous on the feet. He just likes to keep it standing. He just likes to beat people up. He likes to knock people out, and we've seen that time and time again. I mean, going all the way back to the first fight of this win streak that he's on, this 6-fight win streak, win against Marcin Bandel versus Var Strikes in the first round. Then Tony Christodoulou punches in the second round. Alan Patrick, obviously that massive head kick and follow-up strikes in the second round. Damir Hadzovic knocked him out with strikes in the first round. Felipe Silva, he landed that brutal counter shot when Silva came rushing in against the cage and completely put him out with one shot. And then it was his last fight at Des Green. It's the first fight that he hasn't put someone away since way back in 2014. So he's just such a dangerous striker. I mean, I think he trained his striking out at Tiger Muay Thai and MMA, which is a fantastic gym for striking, and there's some absolute killers over there. And as I said, his background is wrestling, so if people want to try and wrestle him and want to try and take him down because he's so dangerous on the feet, they can't do it, man, because he's got such a good background in wrestling, and I think he's got that sambo background as well. And again, this for me is going to be a really fun fight because Carlos Diego Ferreira he's on a bit of a streak at the moment. He's on a 4-fight tear himself. He got the decision wins over Olivier Aubin-Mercier and most recently against Rustam Habilov, and then sandwiched in between that with victories via strikes over Jared Gordon and Carl Nelson. So again, this is a man who's on a bit of a tear. For me, he's again a guy who's most dangerous on the ground. He's a decorated grappler. He's again a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, a very very capable Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt as well. But he's a decent striker as well, and we've certainly started to see over the last few fights that his striking has improved. His outputs, he's got a lot more output. I mean, he throws at quite a high strike rate now, about 5 significant strikes per minute, I believe, land, and yeah, he over the course of his career, he's definitely improved on the in the striking aspect of the game. And for me, this is going to be a battle of accumulation strikes against power strikes, and Taisumov is that guy who possesses the power. I mean, he often only throws occasionally the one shot is enough, as we saw against Felipe Silva, but he's more of a overhand right left hook kind of guy, or just those three strike combinations. But Carlos Diego Ferreira will be a bit more aggressive with his strikes. I think he'll throw a bit more volume. He'll try to put a few more strikes together and be a bit more of the aggressor. But I don't think he quite holds the same power that Taisumov does. I mean, Taisumov, when he throws down the pipe, he's, especially that right hand, I mean, he's so dangerous, and for me, that's his best strike. I love it when he throws that crisp right hand, and I mean, that Felipe Silva just epitomised that for me with him using his head movement to duck the oncoming Silva, and then just to land that crisp right hand that left Silva not knowing where the hell he was. I mean, it was beautiful. If you haven't seen it or you forgot about it, go and watch it again, makes it's fantastic. But yeah, for me, this fight, Taisumov is going to be able to keep the fight standing. I don't think it will go to the mat. I don't think Carlos Diego Ferreira will be able to take Taisumov down. I don't think Taisumov will take the fight to the mat because he likes to stand there and trade. And then it becomes a striking battle. And for me, Taisumov is the better striker. I think he's more technical. I think he throws with more power. I just think Carlos Diego Ferreira maybe has slightly higher output. I think he will try to land more shots, but Taisumov's got good movement. He's got a good head movement. He's quite elusive. So I don't think he's been able to do it. And yeah, I really fancy Taisumov in this fight. I mean, as I said, he's got power. We've seen Carlos Diego Ferreira knocked out before by the man who's fighting in the main event, Dustin Poirier. That was his last loss back in 2015. He finished him in the first round via strikes, and I'm going for my this is going to be my first finish of the breakdowns. I think Taisumov is going to be able to land those heavy shots. I think he's going to be able to land that heavy right hand, that big straight right, and after catching 2 or 3 of those, it starts to wobble you, and I think Taisumov's then going to land a big strike, and it's going to send Ferreira crashing to the mat. And I think Taisumov's going to finish it off with strikes when he gets there. And I think I think Mairbek Taisumov is going to win this fight via strikes in round 2.
Yeah, man, I love this fight, and I actually love both fighters as well. You know, how can you not love Mairbek Taisumov? The dude's an absolute animal. He's got 27 wins on his record, and 24 of them have been finishers, 15 knockouts, 9 submissions. So, and that's the other crazy thing as well. The dude's got 9 submissions. Like, all we tend to see from this guy is him absolutely deading people. But, you know, he has got finishers on the mat. Not that that's going to matter here, because one of the reasons why I love Diego Ferreira is because the dude is such, again, like I said with Davi Ramos, Ferreira is such a legitimate credentialed Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. And, you know, the difference is between him and Ramos is if Ferreira is on his back, which we have seen him on his back before, he will look for all kinds of manoeuvres on the mat. So he'll look for sweeps, he'll look for reversals, he'll throw up an armbar or triangle. He'll just, you know, he's got so many weapons in his arsenal on the mat, and he's such a good MMA grappler. And I actually think that as dangerous as Taisumov is, because he's an absolute monster, like we've already discussed, as dangerous as Taisumov is on the feet, Ferreira is as dangerous on the mat. So they're both an absolute threat here. Now, I'm edging towards Taisumov in this fight, and the reason being is I think it's I think it's going to be the undoing of Ferreira. I think he's going to be his own enemy. And like I said in the Barboza Felder fight, I almost feel that, like I said with Felder, in regards to it's going to be Felder that dictates what happens in that fight. I think it's going to be Ferreira that dictates what happens in this fight, and it's actually up to him whether he wins or loses this fight, because he's got to search for takedowns, and that's his biggest fault. That's his biggest flaw, in my opinion, in MMA. The fact that he doesn't hunt for takedowns anywhere near as much as he should.
Yeah.
Statistically, he actually shoots less than one takedown per fight, and it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. I don't get why he's not relentless with it. Like you look at Damian Maia. Damian Maia, he don't really fuck about on the feet too much. He goes straight in for takedowns and wants to fight to the mat. Verheyen absolutely needs to start adopting that strategy, because although he's improving, he made the move over to Fortis MMA and his striking is improving. It is genuinely looking better. His shots are looking more measured, more crisp, more accurate, and he's always had relatively decent power as well on the feet, with him winging, that typical Brazilian that wings bombs, not giving a fuck if he overexerts and someone takes him down, because that's his will down on the mat. So Ferreira has to search for takedowns in this fight, and they're not going to come easily. So if he's got that game plan, which I hope he has for the sake of the fight, he has to understand and appreciate that he cannot give up after the first one or two failed takedowns, because Taisumov's got strong hips. The takedowns that Ferreira predominantly shoots, or the ways he tries to take his opponents down, are from the cage, so he'll try and pin his opponents back up against the cage, and the strong hips will allow Taisumov to he'll give him time. He'll give Taisumov time to sort his arms out, to try and get underhooks in, to try and peel Ferreira off him. And like I say, it's not going to come easy for Ferreira, but he's got to be relentless, because if he decides to strike with Taisumov, I think it'll be quite close initially for like the first few minutes of striking, but I think Taisumov is a very clever striker. I think he'll take a little bit of time, not throw too much, but while he's doing that, he'll be making reads, a little bit like what Nasrat Haqparast did in his last fight against Joaquim Silva. He didn't throw a lot. He actually lost that first round, but he was making really smart reads, and Taisumov is that type of fighter as well. So if Ferreira comes out wanting to strike, he might end up getting led into a false sense of security, thinking, actually, I'm doing okay here. He's not firing back. But what Taisumov will be doing is making those reads to, spot openings and look for when he can land his power shots. And eventually it's going to, if that's the case, it's going to be a bad night for Ferreira. So I really hope Ferreira comes out and he does have a game plan to take Taisumov down. If he can get Taisumov down, and even if it's only sort of like a half takedown, like he's dragged him to the mat from the cage and Taisumov sort of got one knee up, and he's not down fully, his back's not flat. Even at that point, Ferreira can start trying to stick one hook in, for example, and then just really wear on Taisumov and work him down via grappling opposed to the wrestling. So even that's an option for him, and if that happens, then fuck, Taisumov's in trouble. Like, you see a minus 250 line on Taisumov, but we'll see how many people are sweating minus 250 if Diego Ferreira's on your back. We'll see. I'm leaning Taisumov, though, for two reasons. One, I think that Ferreira won't aggressively attack the takedowns as he should. He hasn't in previous fights, but then again, he hasn't fought an absolute killer like Taisumov, so, that mindset might change in this fight. But I can't assume that he's going to anyway, just from previous fights and what I've seen in tape. I also think he could get discouraged if he tries to take Taisumov down a couple of times and it doesn't work. I do think that from a morale perspective, I think it can definitely dent that. And then at that point, he's going to have to stay stood up with Taisumov, and he might be thinking in his head at that point, well, I've tried to get it down to the mat, that hasn't worked, and now I'm going to have to face what I didn't want to face, and suddenly you get a mental aspect come into the fight, and Ferreira may not be where he wants to be. And if he doesn't come out for the takedowns and he is happy to strike, I think Taisumov just gets the better of him anyway in that position, regardless of any, mental aspects or game plan that he's potentially come into the fight with. So I like Taisumov in this fight. I think it's going to be very sketchy for him if he does get taken down. It's going to be very hairy. But ultimately, I do think he can keep the fight vertical. If he does get taken down momentarily, I do trust Taisumov a little bit more just to get the fight stood back up quite instantly and carry on striking. So for that reason, I am going to pick Mairbek Taisumov to win the fight. And like I say, I think the longer the fight goes on the feet, the longer the fight goes on, the longer they're both vertical, the more chance it gives Taisumov to make those reads. Like you've already mentioned, John is the more technical fighter, and he will find the openings, and at some point I think he's going to knock Ferreira out. So I'm taking Mairbek Taisumov to win. I'm taking him to win via knockout. And in the final fight on the Newsome MMA main card, we've got the returning Zubaira Tukhugov versus England's Lerone Murphy. John, who have you got?
Yeah, this is a fight that I'm really looking forward to, mainly because I'm really looking forward to seeing Zubaira Tukhugov back in action. I mean, we haven't seen him since 2016 when he lost that very close decision to Renato Moicano, obviously, who we know has gone on to do very good things and go on to fight some of the best in the division. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing him back in action. I think people have forgot how good his fighting skills are in the cage and not outside of the cage or on top of the cage, as we saw in the aftermath of the McGregor and Khabib Nurmagomedov brawl of last year. But yeah, it was a bit of a shock when his opponent was announced, Lerone Murphy, an Englishman, one of our own, going into dangerous waters against a very dangerous fighter. But if people have seen this guy, I mean, he's a good prospect. I mean, he's a dangerous guy, and his backstory is very good. I mean, he used to. I was reading that he used to running a gang, and at one point he got shot. I believe he got shot in the neck, and he's kind of, after that he took up MMA, and he was like, right, this is where I need to focus all my attentions because yeah, getting shot against on the streets is no good for you in the long term. So yeah, and he's taken to it well. I mean, he's unbeaten throughout his amateur and professional career so far. He's got heavy hands. If anybody has seen him, I mean, he's fought some decent opponents as well. If you take away Nathan Thompson, who I think had a record of 7-39 when he fought against him, his opponents have got decent records. He's fought on a couple of decent cards. I know over here in England, Fight Star Championship, they always tend to put on decent cards. Full Contact Contender as well, they always try to put on good cards. And for me though, it's just that step up in competition. I mean, his last opponent, Manolo Sciana, he fought for the title at Full Contact Contender 23. Sciana was 8-3 at the time, and Sciana had a bit of success. I mean, he landed a couple of shots on Lerone Murphy, but in the end, Murphy mixed it up with a nice takedown and got the fight to the mat, and then landed some heavy ground and pound. And one thing that I think is going to be really fun in this fight, I honestly think this has got potential to be fight of the night, by the way, is that both guys have quite a similar fluid movement style. Lerone Murphy will regularly switch stances, switch between orthodox and southpaw. Both guys are very fluid in with their strikes, with their kicking especially. Tukhugov, I think people forget, I mean, how much of a good striker he is. Obviously, because we haven't seen him in action for a long time. I mean, he fires out that left switch kick extremely quickly. He throws those spinning kicks to the body as well really nicely. And he just loved to throw strikes, and he's got very good movement either offensively or defensively as well. We saw against Ernest Chavez. I know this was back in 2014, but I mean that was only 3 fights ago for Tukhugov. In that fight, Chavez was really pushing Tukhugov back, but against the fence. But Tukhugov was circling off nicely. He was creating nice angles to counter and strike, and man, he's busting up Chavez's face with those straight shots and mixing in the kicks as well, to the body, and that switch kick to the head as well. And I mean, he's just a really good fighter to watch, and being a Russian and being the guys that he trains with as well, you know that he's going to be more than capable if the fight hits the mat as well. But I think these two guys are going to want to stand there and trade. I think they're going to stand there and duke it out in the striking exchanges, which for me could signal fireworks, because like I said, Lerone Murphy has got power. He's got one punch power. We saw that again in the fight against Terry Doyle, where he knocked him out in 40 odd seconds with a beautiful counter left hook. Zubaira to Tukhugov, for me, I think he's slightly more of a technical striker. Maybe doesn't possess that one punch power as much, but he does possess accumulation strikes, which we saw in that Chavez fight. And yeah, I'm just really excited to see how this plays out. I mean, if you can go to a decision with Renato Moicano, who's a very dangerous guy himself, I mean, you know that you've got ability. You know this guy's got some. He can go some way. And I think if he starts fighting regularly and he starts getting back in there on a regular basis from now on, I think he can really charge up the rankings and make a push for that top 10. And yeah, for me, I think Tukhugov he's going to be the slightly more technical. I think he's going to be able to call on wrestling if he needs to as well. Although I've said that it's going to be a standard battle. If he's losing that battle, I think he will be able to turn to his wrestling. I think when he does turn to his wrestling, I think he will be able to take Lerone Murphy down. I think he will be able to spend a lot of time in top control if he wanted to as well. But from that first bell, I think that they're going to battle it out striking first and foremost, and Tukhugov, I think we'll see where he goes from there. If he's fine with the power of Murphy, I think he'll continue to strike. I think he'll outstrike him technically. I think, like I said, they're both elusive. I think Tukhugov for me could be the slightly more elusive with his movement, his head movement, and his footwork, and I think more of Murphy's fluidity comes from that stance switching. But yeah, I think Tukhugov is going to be able to outstrike him, and I think he's going to get a victory. And I wouldn't be surprised if possibly he drops him in middle of round 2, possibly early round 3, and jumps on a submission on the mat if he hasn't already sworn with the ground and pound. But I think Tukhugov is going to win this fight. I think he's going to win it mid to late fight via stoppage.
Yeah, I really like this fight, and I really like what I'm seeing out of Lerone Murphy as well. You know, he's 8-0. He's a athletic, physical specimen. He's tall for the division. He's powerful. He's fearless. He'll come forward. He'll switch stances, striking. He's a real threat on the feet, and he loves the kicking game. He'll kick to the body. We've seen him hurt multiple opponents with kicks, even kicks that get blocked. tend to hurt his opponents as well. So the other side to his game is when he closes the distance, he's physical in the clinch. He'll drag his opponents down to the mat. He's comfortable in top control. He'll work on top. He'll stay busy. He'll make the referee step away and not make them stand up. He really I think he's gonna win a lot of fights in the UFC. Is he going to win this fight here on Saturday? I'm not too convinced, because on the opposite side he's got Zubaira Tukhugov, which, by the way, just a quick side point, it's funny that Dana White said that none of the guys involved in that brawl would ever fight in the UFC again, yet we've got Khabib Nurmagomedov, Islam Makhachev and Zubaira Tukhugov on one card, which is pretty hilarious. I think it's the absolute right decision. You can't cut those 3 guys from the UFC, but that's just a side note. But yeah, coming back to Tukhugov, he's had some time off. I think it's just over 3 years. But listen, Magomed Mustafayev had a lot of time off as well, and then he came back in against Fiziev and knocked him out brutally in round 1 and looked excellent in that fight as well. So I don't put too much stock into the ring rust. I think Tukhugov is probably going to look even better than he looked previously as well. I wasn't always sold on him, but I think definite improvements can be made in 3 years, especially with the guys that he trains at. Obviously he's got all the Dagestanis, and then he's been over at Tiger Muay Thai again as well. So he's had a lot of good bodies around him. There's absolutely a good chance that he's improved. Now, for me, I think one of the points that you made, John, is very crucial in this fight, and that's the fact that Tukhugov has got his wrestling to fall back on should he need it. Because what's going to happen in the striking battle is, I think Lerone Murphy's going to want to keep on the outside, and he's got them long straight shots down the pipe as well. So he'll be switching stances. He'll be making Tukhugov struggle with his reads, and he can throw those strikes coming in and out, like I say, the long straight punches, and he does move well on the feet, so he's got the ability to move in and out of range should he need to, and he can also stay at kicking range as well and really blast the body of Tukhugov, blast the legs of him, and then sort of when Tukhugov's thinking of the legs and the body, he can come up top and maybe cause some trouble that way. So I think that's where Lerone Murphy's going to want this striking game to play out. However, Tukhugov will get beat if that fight plays out on the feet in that way. So you look at where Tukhugov strikes and how he adopts that side of his game, and he's a burst striker, so he doesn't have a ton of volume. He won't be constantly trying to pep you. He definitely doesn't want to be staying on the outside. What he does is, again, he's quite measured. He makes reads, but when he comes to attack, he'll come in flurries. So he'll burst forwards. He'll come inside the kicking range, through the kicking range, into boxing range. He'll land 2 or 3 shots on you. Sharp hands, powerful hands, and then he'll back off, and again he'll get some reads in and he'll go again, and that's what we call a burst fighter. So he'll come in sporadically, but when he does, it's quite violent. It's a flurry, it's combinations. So that's where Tukhugov is in his striking, and actually that also kind of looks good in the judges' eyes, in my opinion. Yeah, you might have Lerone Murphy that's picking him apart at range, but the fighter that's aggressive and coming forward, and if he's landing punches inside that range in combinations, he's probably going to start causing some wear and tear on Murphy's face as well. And again, that's something else that looks good in the judges' eyes. But then, like I've already mentioned, one of the key things that you mentioned, John, is the fact that he can fall back on his wrestling should he need to. So if Lerone Murphy is keeping distance really well, he is managing it perfectly well, and Tukhugov's struggling to cause this burst striking coming inside, he's got to have a plan B, and the wrestling is there. He's not an overly aggressive, relentless wrestler like your Khabib, like your Islam Makhachev, but he has a very, very quick reactive takedown, and he got Moicano down a couple of times with it. He's actually one of the quickest reactive takedowns that from memory that I can think of seeing. It comes in so quickly, and it's so effective as well. Now, I think Murphy's going to be liable to be taken down in this fight should that happen. I do think Tukhugov can take him down. So this is why I'm leaning towards Tukhugov, because although I believe Murphy has got a lot to give in this sport, in the UFC as well. Like I say, this won't be, if he loses this fight, this won't be his last fight. He'll be back again. He'll probably be on a Euro card, and he'll beat up on somebody. He's going to get wins in the UFC. I'm just not convinced it's against Tukhugov, because if Murphy does start getting his own way, Tukhugov's got a pretty solid plan B to go with his plan A as well. So I'm finding it tough to pick Murphy to win this fight. Would I be totally shocked if he caught him with a big power shot in round 1 to the body, maybe put Tukhugov down and finished him off with strikes? That sort of scenario. No, it wouldn't shock me at all. But I do think the fight goes the distance, and because I feel the fight goes the distance, I think that Tukhugov has got the tools the weapons, the two game plans, game plan A, game plan B, and for that reason, I'm going to take Tukhugov to win. I'm going to take him to win via decision. And with the Newsome MMA main card complete, we'll now quick fire off the remaining Newsome MMA prelims. And first up is Curtis Blaydes versus Shamil Abdurakhimov. John, who have you got?
Yeah, I'm going to keep this one pretty short and sweet. I think that Curtis Blaydes is going to be able to have his way with Shamil Abdurakhimov in the wrestling stakes. It's not very often that we say that the Russian's going to be liable to get taken down, but we have seen him taken down before. We saw Arlovsky take him down a couple of times in their fight. Curtis Blaydes is a very, very good wrestler, one of the best wrestlers in the heavyweight division, if not the best wrestler in the heavyweight division that I could think of off the top of my head, obviously besides Daniel Cormier. And yeah, I just think Curtis Blaydes is going to be able to get the fight to the mat. I mean, he took Justin Willis down about 7 times in their last fight. Look what he did to Alistair Overeem, where he took him down and smashed him in the guard. Mark Hunter took him down over and over again, and I don't see this going any other way. I mean, Abdurakhimov, what's his path to victory? Possibly knocks Curtis Blaydes out. Blaydes has been knocked out, but that was by Francis Ngannou, who's an absolute animal, twice. Well, once was a knockout, and then obviously the doctor stoppage because that nasty eye in the first instance. I don't think Abdurakhimov has got that one-punch knockout power to be able to pull an Ngannou on him. So for me, I think there's only one winner in this fight. I think it's going to be Curtis Blaydes. I think he takes the fight to the mat. He either wins a decision, or we see similar to the Alistair Overeem fight, and we see him win it late on with some heavy ground and pound in the guard. But yeah, I'm going with Curtis Blaydes to win this fight.
Yeah, I've got Curtis Blaydes as well, man. You know, the line's wide in this fight, and I think it's absolutely justified. I think it's a good fight for Curtis Blaydes. The striking's going to be relatively close. Curtis Blaydes does have to be careful because Abdurakhimov looked great against Marcin Tybura, and, you know, eventually finished Tybura. Abdurakhimov's hands have been looking pretty decent lately, and he's also a Dagestani as well. He's not the type of Dagestani that's going to be relentless with his takedowns again, like Khabib or Makhachev. But you know, he's got wrestling offensively and defensively, so I don't think it's going to be a walk in the park for Blaydes to score takedowns, which I think is where his path to victory lies. But eventually I do think the takedowns are going to come. The reason being, I think Abdurakhimov's a little bit slower on the feet. He's a little bit more flat-footed, and those two things are very beneficial for a wrestler to fight against. So I think Blaydes is going to hang on the feet. He could potentially, if the fight stayed on the feet for 15 minutes, I think it would be a close decision. But I do think that Blaydes could beat Abdurakhimov striking. I think the wrestling's where he's going to win the fight, though. I think the takedowns are going to come. Abdurakhimov does slow down a little bit when he's made to work. Obviously, Tybura never really made him work that much, and that's why he didn't slow down as much in that fight. But I think if Blaydes is pressing him against the cage and scoring takedowns, making Abdurakhimov get back up if he can get back up, it's just going to wear Abdurakhimov down. I think the takedowns are going to keep coming, and I agree with you, John. I think he's going to get him down late, and I think we're going to see a TKO finish. So I'm going Curtis Blaydes to win, and I'm going to take him to win via knockout. And in the next fight, we've got Joanne Calderwood versus Andrea Lee. John, who have you got?
Yeah, I'm actually really looking forward to this fight. Two women who are on a I want to say a surge, although Calderwood lost the last fight against Chukagian, but the two fights prior to that, she looked really good against Kalindra Farrier and Ariane Lipsky. She started to mix in takedowns a lot more. She's obviously trying at Syndicate MMA now out in Las Vegas, and she seems to have fit in really well there, and it seemed to have improved the game a lot. And she's looking very dangerous now, because obviously we know she's got that solid Muay Thai background. Obviously mixing in takedowns off her back, she's thrown up submissions. We saw that against Kalindra Farrier, where she caught her in that triangle armbar, and yeah, she's looking really good. And she's going up against another fighter in Andrea Lee, who herself is on a tear. She's undefeated since 2016. She's on about a 7-fight win streak, I believe, if I remember correctly. And yeah, she's she's a dangerous fighter herself again, who's got a good Muay Thai background. She's also good when the fight hits the mat. For me, I think that Andrea Lee's going to be stronger in the clinch. And when I say stronger in the clinch, I mean physically stronger. I think Jojua Calderwood will have the advantage with obviously the elbows and the knees. I think she's slightly more dangerous there, but I think Andrea Lee will be able to overpower and overstrength Calderwood in clinch scenarios and push her up against the fence. And I do think that she's going to be able to take her down off of those clinch up against the fence scenarios. I do think Calderwood will also be able to take Lee down. Lee tends to like to throw kicks. Jojua Calderwood is good at catching those kicks and getting takedowns off them. We saw that in the Tukhugov fight. A lot of people I haven't watched the full fight back, and I seem to recall a lot of people at the time thinking that Calderwood should have got the nod in that fight. I remember one judge gave it 30-27 in favour of Tukhugov, which I remember thinking at the time was a bit strange. For me, it was a close fight. It was one of those fights that could have gone either way. I think 30-27 didn't quite do Calderwood justice there. I think she definitely won a round if I remember correctly. But for me, I just think Andrea Lee's going to be the slightly stronger of the two physically. I think she's going to have the slightly better wrestling, and I think that is going to help her edge out a close decision. And again, I think it's going to be a close fight. I think it's going to be a similar fight to the Tukhugov fight, and obviously Andrea Lee's last fight went to the distance as well with Montana De La Rosa. But I think Andrea Lee's going to be on the victorious end of a decision here.
Yeah. I think Andrea Lee trumps Joanne Calderwood very slightly in every aspect of MMA. So I do think it's got the potential to be quite close. But you look at the last three fights. So from Andrea Lee's perspective, she beat Veronica Macedo, Ashley Evans-Smith, Montana De La Rosa. I think those three wins and how she won those fights in the fashion that she did in regards to them being dominant really speaks volumes. And then you look at Calderwood's last three fights, so you've got Kalinda Farrier no longer with the UFC, Ariane Lipski, a fighter that isn't the fighter that we thought she was, and then Caitlin Chukagian, which you've just mentioned, John, and a fight that I thought, I was actually thinking that Calderwood would get the nod in that fight, but obviously she didn't. It was unanimous, which is a surprise, and like you said, a 30-27 is just ridiculous, but it was a close enough fight, and it's not a bad loss. Caitlin Chukagian's a good fighter, but like you say, I think Lee's just going to be slightly better everywhere. I think on the feet she's got volume, enough volume to really hit Calderwood. That's one of Calderwood's biggest weaknesses on the feet, in my opinion. The fact that she is very hittable, she's open to be hit, and I think the jab for Andrea Lee is going to work really well in this fight. I think she's going to be able to really touch Calderwood up quite a lot. And then if Calderwood does start trying to wrestle, I do think she could get Lee down at some points. She has got very underrated wrestling, in my opinion, Calderwood, but I don't think the fight is going to be won and lost on the mat. Lee's also a good wrestler herself, strong, like you've already mentioned, physically imposing, and I think she'll find a way back up to her feet or find a way to stuff takedowns later in the fight. I think the fight is going to be won and lost on the feet, so I'm going to take Andrea Lee to win. I'm going to take her to win via decision. And in the next fight, we've got the newcomer Liana Jojua versus Sarah Moras. John, who have you got?
Yeah, I'm quite surprised that Sarah Moras is still with the UFC, if I'm being honest. She's lost her last three fights in a row. She's lost 4 of the last 5. So her only victory coming against Ashley Evans-Smith back in 2017. She has fought some decent opponents in that time. Jessica Andrade, obviously we know all about her. Lucy Pudilova as well. He's a good fighter. And then the latest 2 losses were to Talita Bernardo and Macy Chiasson. But yeah, I'm still quite surprised that she's been given another shot, and she's going up against a girl that I think you probably know more about than I do. I know when we spoke earlier in the week, you said you'd been doing quite a bit of background work into Jojua. I've only seen clips here and there and a couple of fights, but she looks a dangerous fight. She looks very dangerous when the fight hits the mat. Again, she's someone who looks strong in the clinch. She looks quite physically imposing, physically strong. I believe she's got a base in Muay Thai as well. So her striking, and again from what I've seen, looks decent. I'm not 100% sold on some of the opposition. I mean, her last fight went to a decision, which she won the fight before that against fighter Victoria Shalimova. She won via heel hook in 28 seconds. It was very, very basic stuff. I mean, Shalimova, she's only 2-2, so she hasn't got a terrible negative record or anything like that, but it was very basic, very simple takedown, and then just from the guard she dropped back and took the heel and cranked the heel hook for the victory, and it kind of looked like her opponent had no ground game whatsoever. But I do like, from what I've seen of Jojua, I do like her in this fight. I'm not particularly high on Sarah Moras. I think that she's hittable. I think that she allows her opponents to kind of set the tempo in the fights, and kind of allows them to impose their game plan too much. And if she does that in this fight, I think that Jojua will have some success. Like I say, I think she looks quite strong in the clinch. I think she's got a decent striking background, and I see Jojua getting a victory on her UFC debut here, and unfortunately handing Sarah Moras her walking papers.
Yeah, it's a really interesting fight, and like you said, like I told you, I'd put a lot of work into this fight, but on the poll on Twitter, the majority of people didn't want this full breakdown, so quick it shall be. Listen, Jojua is definitely one to look for the future. She's, she looks good inside the cage. She's got a good Instagram game as well going on, which a lot of people have been talking about. But in regards to her skills, as striking, he's not absolutely there right now, but at 24 years old, there's still time for her to develop. In regards to her grappling is really, really good, and this is where she's strongest. Again, the problem is she doesn't really attempt very many takedowns. Like I said about Ferreira earlier on, it's not something that that she hunts for. And in her last fight, it was a 5-round fight against Marina Moknakina, and it was Marina that was, shooting the takedowns, looking to get the fight to the mat. And once on the mat, Jojua was really good, trying to lock up a leg and trying to sweep and reverse. And, from that aspect, she does look really good. But I'm actually leaning towards Sarah Moras in this fight, and I didn't think I would be, because Moras is... No, she's normally armbar or bust. If she doesn't get that armbar, she really struggles to win fights, and she's on a 3-fight losing streak. But you look at the fights that she's lost. Macy Chasson, one we're watching for the future. Talita Bernardo, a good fighter. Pudilova, a good fighter. Andrade, obviously now ex-champion. Raquel Pennington. So they're all good fighters that she loses to. And actually, the Macy Chasson fight was an eye-opener for me, because she actually attacked the takedown. She showed that she got a good reactive double leg takedown, and I think if she adopts that similar game plan in this fight, she can take Jojua down. And although she's got to be really careful of the sweeps and reversals, I think she can spend the majority of the time on top of Jojua before she actually sweeps, reverses, or stands back up. And whilst the fight's on the feet, I think Moras has got a better jab. She's got better fundamentals on the feet. So I actually like Moras to win this fight. Weirdly, I don't think it's going to be armbar or bust, because I'm going to take her to win via decision. So I'm going to take Sarah Moras to win. I'm going to take her to win via decision. And in the next fight, we've got Ottman Azaitar, the newcomer, against the returning, the forgotten Teemu Packalén. John, who have you got?
Yeah, this is going to be an interesting fight. Obviously, like you say, Packalén is returning after Yoga and Mark DeCasey punched his lights out back in 2017 at back here in England, if I remember rightly, in a spectacular highlight reel finish that was. And I think he's threatened to get back in there a couple of times, but injuries and other circumstances have meant that we haven't seen him. I'm glad he's taken some time off, because that knockout was brutal. I don't quite think he intended to have 2 years off, but yeah, here he is back again, and this is going to be a good fight, because Packalén, for me, his best work is done. He's done on the mat. I mean, when you look at his record, his majority of wins come via decision. He has got a decent wrestling background, I believe, similar to Mr. Finland himself, Mr. Makwan Amirkhani. So I think he's going to want to take this fight to the mat, because Ottman Azaitar he's got very good a very good boxing background. He's got a very good striking. If you look at his record, a lot of his finishes have come via strikes in the first round. He's coming from a good promotion in Brave as well. They put on some good fights, got some good competition there. And from what I've seen of him, he's got heavy hands. He throws with power. He also has good scrambles. I've watched a couple of his fights, and when his opponents threatened to take him down, he scrambled well to get back to his feet, and he looks quite difficult to take down. And if that's the case against Pacquiao, I think I fancy the newcomer again to be the better striker and to be able to do damage on the feet. And I actually think Ottman Azaitar is going to win this fight. I actually think he's going to put away Teemu Pacquiao on the feet to get the stoppage victory.
Yeah, initially I was wondering why Pacquiao's name is suddenly popping back up in the UFC, and when you look back at when his last fight was against Mark, it was only 2017. So yeah, 2.5 years is quite long, but Tukhugov's been out longer. When we were talking about him earlier on, so maybe he was just taking the time out, and he was supposed to fight back in April at UFC St. Petersburg against Yakovlev, but he pulled out with an undisclosed injury. So he has stayed on the scene, and it's just weird because it seems like it feels longer than what it actually is. But he's here against Ottman Azaitar, and Azaitar 11-0. He's looking great. Over in his last few fights in Brave. Really, really looking good. He's got a good power in his hands. He's calm. He's composed. He's strong. He's got decent wrestling as well, and he's gonna be a handful for Pacquiao. And I actually think Azaitar's going to knock him out. I think the pressure eventually is going to get to Pacquiao. I think the aggression along with that pressure is going to go hand in hand as well. But the one thing just to mention really quickly here is there's going to be a huge size difference inside the cage, because Azaitar, I think, is about 5'7" and Pacquiao's 6'1". So the size difference in this fight is going to be crazy. And it's not as if Pacquiao's like a twig, skinny. He's a little bit built himself. So it's going to be interesting to see how Azaitar matches up with him and how he goes in the cage preparing to deal with someone that's going to be much taller than him and potentially just as strong as him, because Azaitar has gotten away with bullying fighters and his opponents in the past inside the cage. So whether he can bully Pacquiao, I'm not too sure at all. But like I say, I just think the hands are too fast, too crisp from Azaitar. I think he's going to find the chin at some point in the fight, and I think he's going to knock him out. I'm going Ottman Azaitar to win. I'm going to take him to win via knockout. And in the next fight, we've got Belal Muhammad versus Takashi Sato. John, who have you got?
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing Belal Muhammad, because I'm a big fan of his, both inside and outside of the octagon. He seems like a good guy. I mean, going slightly away from the fighting side of things, if you don't follow Belal Muhammad on Twitter, I recommend that you do, because he's a really funny guy. I mean, him and Jared Gordon are always playing each other up, pranking each other, and just having a good time in life. So it's always fun to see his tweets pop up on my feed. But go back to the fight itself. Again, I like Belal Muhammad to win this fight. I think that he's one of those fighters that's just really solid everywhere. Obviously, we know he fights at Reef for Sport. His teammates include Paul Felder, who obviously is on this card. So and the Pettis brothers. So obviously he's training with guys who are very good strikers. He's got very decent takedown defense himself. He's got some decent takedowns. We saw that in the fight against Curtis Millender. He's tough. I mean, he can take a shot. We've seen that in the fights against Alan Joban. Jeff Neal landed some heavy shots as well. Luke is the only guy in his career to put Belal Muhammad away. Takashi Sato, obviously he's coming in. This is his second fight in the UFC. He's come from Pancrase. His first fight was against Ben Saunders. Ben Saunders in that first round had a bit of success actually, but then got caught with a nice straight shot. And I think that's Sato's best weapon is his movement and those straight shots straight down the pipe, fighting out of that southpaw stance. But Yeah, for me, I just think Bilal Muhammad he's going to be able to out pressure Sato. I think he's I think honestly, I just think he's better all round. His all round game is better. I mean, he's Bilal Muhammad is one of those guys for me where he's kind of a bit of a jack of all trades, master of none. He doesn't stand out particularly with his striking, doesn't really stand out with his wrestling, but he's just got really solid fundamentals in all those aspects, and he's tough as nails. So he's always going to be a guy that's hard to defeat, and I don't think that Sato will be able to. I don't know if he's got that volume kind of style to defeat Bilal Muhammad. I don't think he's able to put him away with strikes. So I think it goes to a decision. And over the course of 3 rounds, I just think Bilal Muhammad has more moments. I think he will try to mix in takedowns. We've seen that from him quite often before. As I said, his striking's good. So he'll have some success on the feet, even if Sato's catching him. I think he'll be able to land shots back himself, and just over the course of 3 rounds, I think he's going to be the more dominant fighter, and I think he's going to win this fight via decision. So yeah, I've got Bilal Muhammad to win via decision.
Yeah, I agree with you. I will say this though, I do think the line is slightly too wide at -360, and for Bilal Muhammad that is, and the reason why I think it's so wide is because Bilal he's never overly dominant in his fights. You know, if he can coast, he'll coast, but you never watch a Bilal Muhammad fight and you just, you know, he's taking your breath away and you're just like, oh my god, what a performance. Like he's a good grindy fighter, but I just don't think -360 is as accurate as it should be. But having said that, I think the striking's quite close in this fight. I think Sato has power. That left straight definitely has power. So Bilal Muhammad has to watch out for that. But as long as Bilal takes away the striking distance from Sato, so in regards to his hands, as long as he can get past the hands, I think he should be absolutely fine in this fight, and he can do this multiple ways. So he can either close distance, clinch Sato up, push him against the cage, grind him a little similar to what he did to Tim Means, and or look for the takedown. You know, dragging Sato down to the mat, putting Sato on his back, doing just enough for the referee not to split him up. You know, that sort of performance is the performance that I think Bilal should adopt and probably will adopt. And for that reason, I do think that he's going to win a comfortable decision. I don't think Bilal will knock him out. And unless Sato makes a glaring error on the mat, I don't think that he's going to find a submission either. So I'm taking Bilal Muhammad to win, and I'm going to take him to win via decision. And in the next fight, we've got Nordin Taleb versus Muslim Salikov. John, who have you got?
Yeah, again, this has got the potential to be a really fun fight. Nordin Taleb's a tough guy. He's been around for a long time now. He's obviously training at TriStar and predominantly, and also Tiger Muay Thai. He's again a guy whose fundamentals are really sound. He's got decent wrestling. His striking's pretty crisp. He's a big guy for the weight class as well, and he's going up against the king of kung fu in Muslim Salikov, who obviously his background is in wushu, which if I'm not mistaken, it's basically kickboxing with takedowns, but I don't think there's very much grappling involved in it. But I'm looking forward to seeing him back in action after obviously coming up to about a year and a half out. His last fight was against Ricky Rainey. He won with that very big shot in the second round, which kind of came out of nowhere. Salikov he's not overly aggressive with his strikes. I mean, he doesn't throw a particularly large amount of volume. He will mix in quite a few spinning techniques. He'll throw in that spinning back kick, and but he does have one punch power. We saw that in the Ricky Rainey fight. And we've seen that in fights against Melvin Gillard a couple of fights ago. He won via spinning heel kick, and he's won by spinning back kick a couple of fights before that as well. He's a dangerous guy, and he is a guy that will utilise those spinning techniques quite a lot, but he's not a guy who really throws a lot of combinations, just mainly one or two punches. And it's going to be really interesting to see how this plays out, because I think Nordin Taleb can have some success, similar to how he did in the first round of the Sean Strickland fight, but obviously he lost that fight, eventually getting caught. He came back from that fight with the victory, the decision over Karl Prepelec. But for me, I think this is going to play out like the Sean Strickland fight. I can see Taleb having some success. I can see him maybe landing a couple of takedowns early on, because Salikov got taken down a couple of times. We saw against Alex Garcia. I don't think he's got that superb wrestling that we see from a lot of Russians. I may be mistaken, because I haven't seen a great deal of him from outside of the UFC, mainly just a few highlights. But from what I've seen, especially that Alex Garcia fight, yes, he possibly is a bit easier to take down than some of the guys we've talked about on this card already. But then at some point, I think Salikov does show that power, and I think he lands a heavy shot on Nordin Taleb, and we saw how that turned out in the Sean Strickland fight. It was the beginning of the end, and he rocked Taleb, and Strickland then pressed forward and landed the ground and pound and got the win. Salikov, whether he rocks Taleb and whether he follows it up with those strikes, I'm not sure, because like I said, he's more of a one or two punch combination guy from what I've seen. But yeah, I think Salikov's going to win this fight. As I say, I think Taleb's going to have success early, but I think Salikov's going to catch him with something, a heavy shot in midway through the fight, and that's going to be the turning point. And I actually think that will lead to Salikov winning this fight and putting away Nordin Taleb. So I'm going with Muslim Salikov to win this fight via stoppage.
Yeah, I think this is the first one we're going to actually disagree on this podcast, on this card. Now, I'm going Nordin Taleb. I'm going the other way, and I'm not sure if I don't think he's there just yet in regards to being chinny. I do still think that he's got a lot to offer. He's a big, powerful striker. He'll throw hard kicks up and down the body, and he really needs to get off on these kicks early on if he's going to have success in this fight, because if he starts breaking Salikov down straight away, it's going to be a very, very long night for Salikov, and it could be, it could make it an easier fight for Nordin himself going forward. He does tend to be a little bit of a coaster as well, so if he does make it an easy fight, you can be assured that he's probably not going to overexert himself, and he'll just continue as he is and probably take a decision. But he does have to be careful of Salikov, and because Taleb's a bit of a coaster and he won't always hunt for that finish, it's just giving Salikov time, and it's just giving him opportunities to try and find a punch to put him out. But Salikov's not really impressed me so much since he's come into the UFC, And one of the things that I dislike most about him is his volume. His volume is really, really low. Now, he has got opportunity. He will have opportunities in this fight because of, like I said, the way Nordin fights. He can be a bit of a coaster. So that is going to present someone who has got low volume with greater opportunities than what another opponent may present them. But still, I think outside of a knockout, I really struggle to see Salikov winning the fight. Like I say, in regards to strikes landed, the power of strikes, volume, all that sort of stuff, I think that goes to Nordin. So if the fight hits the scorecards, I'd be very surprised if Salikov won a decision unless he decided to up his volume in this fight, something that we haven't seen from him previously. So I am going to take Nordin to win this fight. I'm probably going to take him to win by decision. I don't think he finishes Salikov, but he does have a plan B in his wrestling as well, which is another reason why I'm leaning towards him as opposed to Salikov. Would I be shocked if Salikov got inside and knocked him out? No, I wouldn't. Strickland knocked Taleb out, and that's a little concerning. But I feel that there's a quite a large difference between the striking of Strickland and the striking of Salikov. So I'm going to take Taleb to win. I'm going to take him to win via decision. And in the next fight, we've got Omari Akhmedov versus Zach Cummins. John, who have you got?
Yeah, I always find it hard to break down an Akhmedov fight because you don't know what you're going to get. I mean, we've seen him previously gas out really badly in the third round of fights. I mean, he's got losses to Sergio Moraes and Zaleski dos Santos in the third round when he's gassed terribly. Obviously that Marvin Vettori fight as well. But then his last fight against Tim Boetsch, he paced himself a lot better. He looked really good in that fight actually, and so it's kind of hard to go by which Omari Akhmedov you're going to get in the fight. And Zach Cummins is a guy who I like. Zach Cummins. He's a good guy, and he's a good solid fighter. Again, he's one of these guys that, as I described Bilal Muhammad, I think he's just a solid all round fighter. I think he's probably would say himself that he's slightly more dangerous on the mat. But he does possess power in his hands as well, and we saw that against in his last fight against Trevin Giles when he hurt Giles in the third round with a big shot and then jumped on the guillotine to get the submission victory. So obviously that immediately raises some alarm bells for me, picking Akhmedov, because we've seen him fade before in the past. Obviously we know he's moved up in weight, but still I'm not 100% convinced that those cardio issues are completely gone. We've seen Zach Cummins be able to do damage and then fights in round 3. For me, I think Akhmedov is going to be the bigger guy out of the two when they get in there. We saw in the Tim Boetsch fight when he did pace himself well, he spent a lot of time pressing Tim Boetsch up against the fence. He was heavy in the clinch there. He landed some very, very nice crisp straight shots as well, which completely destroyed the nose of Tim Boetsch. Tim Boetsch is coming towards the end of his career. I think that Zach Cummins is a level slightly higher than Boetsch, but yeah, I have found this a really, really tough pick. I'm actually going to go with Omari Akhmedov. I'm going to take him to use that pacing of Tim Boetsch and being the heavy guy. I think he will be able to have some success in the clinch against Zach Cummins, and I think he will be able to spend some time leaning up against him on the fence. But if he does start to tire, if he does empty the tank too early, I wouldn't be surprised at all if Zach Cummins comes charging back midway through the second round and then into the third round and gets a finish late on. But yeah, I'm going to go with Omari Akhmedov to win this fight, and I think he's going to win by decision.
Yeah, I agree. I like Akhmedov in this fight as well. He looked like a totally different fighter against Tim Boetsch, and actually Tim Boetsch poses similar threats as what Zach Cummins is going to pose in regards to power, in regards to kicks, wanting to push forward, also wanting to potentially tie up as well. So I do see some similarities in that fight, but like I say, I like the way Akhmedov paced himself, and he actually showed he's got a bit of a technical side to him as well. He did hunt for takedowns against Boetsch, but he was unable to land them, so maybe he felt like he was forced to strike. But the fact that he consciously didn't overexert himself early on, so he gassed late on, is definitely a positive side, especially from the mental aspect as well. It shows that he's mentally aware. Against Zach Cummins, he's got to watch for a few of Zach's weapons, so especially the kicks. Zach really likes to use his kicks at range, again to the legs and to the body. He really mixes it up well, and he's just a really tricky guy to deal with. His movement's quite awkward as well, so Akhmedov's got to have, he's got to have an idea of what Cummins is going to bring, and he's got to be very aware, and I think he's going to have to make some in-cage adjustments if he's going to want to win this fight. But I think it's a fight that goes a distance, and I just feel that maybe Cummins at 35 may have had his best days. Those may be behind him. And I feel like Akhmedov has still got a lot of life left in him, especially now he's moved up in weight. So I don't think Akhmedov finishes Cummins, because I think Cummins is tough. And if Akhmedov does try to finish him, he's going to overexert himself. And I think that'll be his downfall. But I do think Akhmedov is going to point his way. He may score a takedown. I don't think he's going to spend too much time on top. I don't think it's going to be one of those types of fights. But I think he's just going to land more meaningful shots throughout the fight. He's probably going to be the aggressor more often than not. And I just think Cummins is going to... I think if anyone fades in this fight, I actually think it could be Cummins, unless Akhmedov overexerts himself. I'm just going from his last fight against Boetsch, and I'm assuming that he's learned from previous errors and previous mistakes. And I think if he starts landing on Cummins, I think Cummins does get a little bit torn up in the face with cuts and blood and that sort of stuff. I think he will wear the shots of Akhmedov, but he'll fade a little bit. I think Akhmedov will just land the more meaningful strikes over 3 rounds, and I think he'll take the decision. So I'm going for Omari Akhmedov to win, and I'm taking him to win via decision. And in the final fight on the podcast and on the card, we've got Don Madge versus the newcomer Fares Ziam. John, who have you got?
Yeah, I'll be honest, I haven't really seen a great deal of Fares Ziam. The Frenchman, from what I know, he's predominantly a stand-up fighter. I did watch some of his a couple of his fights, and he does tend to prefer to keep it standing and battle it out on the feet. And he's going up against a good kickboxer in Don Madge himself. I was really impressed with Don Madge in his last fight, actually, against Tay Edwards. His striking was crispy. He managed to stuff a couple of takedowns. When he did get taken down, he was throwing up arm bars and submissions off the bottom. He's looking to sweep and reverse, and yeah, I was just really impressed with him. And his current record is 8-3-1, but if you take away a guy by the name of Leon Meinhardt, he's actually undefeated, because his 3 losses have all come in against that guy in EFC. So it's going to be interesting to see how this one plays out. I think personally it's going to be a stand-up battle, and if it is, I'm favouring Don Madge to win it out of the two of them. And I just think that little bit more experience, especially having fought in the UFC previously. I know it was his debut in his last fight, but it was a really impressive debut. He showed that he's got skills on the ground as well as his kickboxing background, and I think he's going to be able to come through and be the better striker of the two. And I do think Ziam, from what I've seen, he looks like he's an entertaining striker. He looks like he could be a fun guy to have around in the UFC, but I just think that Don Madge at the moment, he's just a better fighter of the two. And so I think Don Madge is going to get this fight. He's going to win this fight, and again, I think it's a fight that is going to be won via decision.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see Fares Ziam, because from what I've seen of him in tape, I'm wondering what the UFC have seen in him, and he's not terrible, but he's not, he's not massively exciting from what I've seen, or very convincing in his performances. So I'm wondering if the UFC have spotted something in him, or they've been tipped off from somebody and tried to get him in early as someone that could develop into a really good fighter. I'm not sure, but I'm really intrigued to see what he's going to be like inside the cage. The guy does have a nice striking base, but he does like to score takedowns and spend time in top control. His previous opposition, his previous competition is a little bit questionable in regards to the whole padded record thing. It's not amazing. I like Don Madge in this fight. I just feel that from what I've seen of Ziam, he does win the majority of his fights, and he feels comfortable via taking his opponents down. But we saw that didn't work with T. Edwards, and Don Madge looked like a fucking bat out of hell in there in that fight. And I just feel that Madge is going to be too aggressive in there. His striking is really going to stifle Ziam's takedown entries, and I just think that I think if Madge comes out how he came out against T. Edwards, which I think he should, I think he's potentially going to put Fares Ziam in a position where it's almost going to be like a rabbit in headlights scenario, like, oh my fucking god, like, you know what I mean? I feel that he could get very overwhelmed, I think is what I'm trying to say, inside the cage. So I think Don Madge is going to finish him as well. I'm not sure how. I'm going to go for a TKO just because of how aggressive he is on the feet, and I feel that if Ziam looks for takedowns whilst moving forward striking, I feel that he's probably not going to be that great on the back foot. So for that reason, I feel if Don Madge comes forward, overwhelms him with strikes, and really makes Ziam wonder what the fuck's going on inside there, then he could potentially finish him via a knockout or TKO. So I'm taking Don Madge to win. I'm going to take him to win via knockout. And that's it for this week's podcast, guys. So, John, before we hit the Newsome MMA mentions, what do you need to mention, man?
Yeah, just as always, hit me up on Twitter, man. If you're down for talking MMA, I'm always around. I'm always up for talking to anyone about this sport. So yeah, make sure you hit me up at MMA and me.
Awesome. Now for the Newsome MMA mentions. First of all, I want to mention the Newsome MMA website. Don't forget to visit the outlet's website at newsomemma.co.uk, where you'll find the locally famous tape index feature, prediction videos, fighter interviews, and the content collaboration with Heavy Duty Fight Management too. You can also request colour commentary and media coverage from Newsome MMA as well. Next up is MMA Play 365, which I spoke about at the start of this podcast. MMA Play 365 is the perfect betting advice platform for any type of gambler. Whether you're in this game for the long term or whether you just want some fun bets whilst watching the fights on the night, the goal is to make money, and that's exactly what we're going to be doing for you. So follow MMA Play 365 over on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram, or visit MMAplay365.com to subscribe today. The next mention is a long-term sponsor of Newsome MMA, which is CBD Life UK. CBD is an amazing product and something that I use myself. Thousands of professional athletes also use CBD too, and at CBD Life UK they've got a wide variety of products to suit the needs of any customer. You can go to cbdlifeuk.com and use promo code Newsome MMA to get 15% off your order. And the final mention is for the newest sponsor of Newsome MMA, Golden Ticket Fight Promotions. Golden Ticket put on some fantastic MMA shows and are one of the biggest regional promotions in the Midlands over here in the UK. The next event is GTFP 12 at Starworks Warehouse, Wolverhampton on September 28th. The tickets are on sale right now, and you can also follow them on all their social channels, Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, to keep up to date with everything Golden Ticket. And that's it from us, guys. Enjoy the fights on Saturday day, and we'll see you again at UFC 243.